just want to thank everybody for skipping the Beyonce concert to be with us tonight. My name's Eli Northrup. I work alongside Conrad and Imani at the Bronx Defenders. We're all So the three of us have spent our careers representing people in criminal court, seeing how the system grinds and how people get caught in those gears. And so this is the perspective we bring to this conversation. We have a job that gives us a pretty intimate view of the lack of justice in our criminal justice system in New York. But I also recently dipped my toe into electoral politics. I ran for state assembly. Yeah, in Morningside Heights, Upper West Side, parts of Harlem. I finished second, which means you lost. But I did get a much closer look at this world of electoral politics, which I really had no experience with before that. And it was a world that's still very new to me. For most of my life, I didn't really understand what it had to do with me, the people that I represented. I didn't think there was much of a reason to pay attention. But a few years ago, through my public defender work, Conrad and I both work on the policy team at Bronx Defenders, I started getting involved in campaigns to try to change criminal laws in New York to make the laws more fair. And so, campaigns like legalizing marijuana, changing how evidence is shared with people who are accused of crimes, reducing pretrial incarceration. And so, in so doing, I started to travel to Albany to talk to legislators about what I was seeing every day in court. Before that, I'd never been to the state capitol. I really didn't know what an assembly member was. But it didn't take me long to realize that people in those seats have real power over the way that we live and survive in this city. And it also didn't take very long to understand that we're not necessarily sending our best and brightest to work on our behalf.
Who's specific?
We'll talk later, Michael. I'll let you know. But just too many people disengaged, out of touch, not grounded in the realities of the people that they represent. But every once in a while, I'd meet someone who gave me a glimmer of hope. Someone who was listening, paying attention, thinking deeply, and it was in that context that I first met Zohran Mamdani. He was a first-term assembly member from Astoria, but what struck me right away was that Zohran seemed to know himself. He was grounded. He listened, asked good questions, and he spoke with clarity and conviction. And over time, my first impressions have only been reinforced. He has integrity. He has a worldview. He has values that aren't up for sale. And sadly, in today's political landscape, that's rare. It shouldn't be, but it is. And that disconnect is, I think, what leads so many of us to check out and not pay attention to politics at a local level. We just want to give up on it. But that's why I think the work that Conrad and Imani have done and do on their podcast and the town halls that they've been holding in Harlem is so important. Because they fostered real, generative conversations and discussions about political participation, why people feel disconnected. And they call people out, and they call people in. So tonight is just an extension of that work. It's a chance to go deeper, to ask hard questions, and to hear directly from someone who wants to lead this city. And I'm personally excited to hear this conversation between three people who I deeply respect. We've got a big choice ahead of us. Who will be the next mayor of New York? And what kind of city do we want to live in? And I think we need to be lifting people up, candidates who are in touch with the people, who understand what's at stake. And for me, Zohran is one of those people. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Zohran Mamdani.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Can we have a round of applause for our incredible hosts? It is amazing to be here with all of you in Harlem this evening. To be here with you as we are now less than 1 month from Election Day. 1 month. And I thought I was celebrating a few days ago because we had just received an internal poll that told us that 8 weeks ago, Andrew Cuomo was beating us by 40 points in the final round. 2 weeks ago, he was beating us by 20 points. And then we got a poll that said we had cut that down to just 12 points. And I said then, we are surely just a week or so away until we cut that lead down into single digits. And what I didn't know is that we were in fact just 48 hours away. Because just 2 hours ago, a new poll was released that we have cut that lead down to just 8 points. And I'm so happy to share that news with each and every one of you here in Harlem. Because we are in the very place that knows how Andrew Cuomo has betrayed so many New Yorkers for so long.
Facts.
That knows the cost of the kind of political leadership that we have had at this city and state level. And I am telling you what I am telling New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs. This June 24th, we have a choice between the past and the future. Between the very leadership that brought us to this place, where I stand before you in the most expensive city in the United States of America, while also being the wealthiest one, where 1 in 4 New Yorkers are living in poverty. Where we hear politician after politician say that this is the greatest city in the world, but they never ask the question that Dr. King asked us so many decades ago. What good is having the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a hamburger? What good is calling this the greatest city in the world if New Yorkers can't afford their rent? If they can't afford their child care? If they can't afford their groceries? If they can't even afford $2.90 for their Metro card? What good is it if we let this city become a museum to what it once was? And that's why I'm running. To make this city affordable. To bring us back to the dream that brought so many here in the first place. To ensure that New Yorkers do more than just struggle. They can actually dream in these 5 boroughs. And I'm tired of hearing so many say they believe in things like housing is a human right. They believe that New Yorkers should be able to have childcare, but they are not willing to work for it. Because as I have run across these 5 boroughs, I have heard the words from many who have reminded me, as is said in James 2:14, faith without works is death. If you simply believe in something but you do not deliver it, then what meaning does it have? And so when I say I believe that New Yorkers should afford it, I mean it, because I'm going to freeze the rent for more than 2 million New Yorkers. When I say that New Yorkers should be able to ride public transit, I mean it, because I'm going to make every single bus fast and free. And when I say that it should be easier to raise a family in this city, I mean it, because I'm going to deliver universal childcare. And I mean these things because I know that if we do not meet this crisis head on, we will lose the city that we love. And we know that while every New Yorker is feeling this crisis, Black New Yorkers are feeling it at a disproportionate level. Because when we look at Bed-Stuy, in the same time that there were 30,000 new white residents, there were 22,000 black residents that left. When we look at our city that now has more population of 8.48 million, we know we've lost more than 200,000 black residents. And when we look at our kids, we know that we have lost nearly 20% of this city's population of black children and teenagers. And we have lost so many New Yorkers because we have made this city so unaffordable. So I stand here today to not only say that it is possible, to not only say that we can do it, but to say that we must, and in just a little over 3 weeks, we will.
Zohran, thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. About a month ago we had, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. About a month ago we had our first town hall, well, second town hall. And the purpose of it was to engage people with, encourage people to be more engaged with local politics. To not be so jaded by the national election. And someone at that event had just got back from canvassing for you. It's my friend over here, Karina.
Thank you.
So for you to be here is really a full circle moment, and I'm thankful for you to be here. So thank you. We're gonna hop right into it, okay?
Please, let's do it.
All right. So for the first question I have for you is, I am 31 years old. My brother Conrad is here, is 32 years old. All right. I feel like I've been adulting for 3 days. Okay. I still trying to file my taxes on time, make sure I have my yearly doctor's appointment, dentist appointments. You know, trying to figure out how to be an adult. You're 33. You're 2 years older than I am. How is your age not a disadvantage to you in this election, given this, the age of Convo and their gathering for both 60 plus?
This is a race between the youngest candidate in the race and the oldest candidate in the race. And it's in many ways also a choice between, as I was saying, the past and the future. You know, I think with youth comes the energy that we need in this moment. An energy that I can tell you we put to the test every day as we crisscross 5 boroughs. An energy that we have to use when I'm told, actually the quickest way to get from here to there is by city bike. We gotta get on it. And also, a hunger for the city that this could be. And I think for too long we have had politicians who have told us that the only way things can be is the way that things already are. And either you start to celebrate it, or you should leave it alone. And we know that the way things are unacceptable. And yet I think what I've also been taught, especially by my parents who raised me, is the importance of having humility amidst all of that. You have to be confident in what you know and also understand what you don't. You have to assemble a team that has years of experience beyond that of your own. And you have to ensure that you are not just looking to surround yourself with people who are the quickest to agree with you, but actually the ones who you know you can trust for an honest assessment, one that is grounded in excellence. And for me, I'm very passionate about public goods, public service. But to care about those things means you also have to care about public excellence. And for too long, we have not held ourselves to that standard in city government. And I'm excited. I'm excited to bring that back to our city administration because New Yorkers deserve nothing less. And that means having by this point I will be a 34-year-old mayor of this city, but also one who understands that my mandate is to make this city more affordable, and the way that I do it is by bringing the best and the brightest on board, the same people who have shown us the glimpses of that future over the last many decades, but have never been empowered to actually do the work necessary. And I will finally ensure that we have that team back at City Hall.
Thank you.
Check. Yeah. So, you know, I heard you when you said that you chose a team with experience, right? Closer. Okay, yeah. So I heard you when you said that you chose a team with experience. And I think that was a smart move. So my next question, keep it to you. My next question is about experience. So I know from doing policy work, I've seen you work firsthand, and I know the work that you do, and I know you come into this race with a lot of experience. But in talking to some people, especially some of our more wiser community members, I'm not going to say they're older, I'm going to say they're wiser, and talking to some of our wiser community members, they really value experience. And a lot of the people that you're running against have experience in the executive, like Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo. So can you just talk to us a little bit about your experience and what makes you qualified to run for it?
I am now in my 3rd term as a state assembly member representing Astoria and Long Island City. And in my time in office, I have had the experience of delivering for working class New Yorkers. You know, I grew up in this city. I came here when I was 7 years old. I was born and raised in Kampala, Uganda, and came to Morningside Heights at the age of 7. And I grew up in this city, and it's a city that I fell in love with. And as a young South Asian man growing up here, I became quite well acquainted with the struggles of taxi drivers across this city. One of my closest friend's fathers was driving a yellow cab and had been sold, like so many other New Yorkers, this dream of a ticket to the middle class. And I saw, as a disproportionately immigrant workforce, 90% of taxi drivers are of immigrant background, had been told if they bought this thing, then they would have this stability. And instead, the city trapped them in a cycle of debt. And it did so to balance a budget on the backs of these working class men and women from across the world. And we saw that 9 drivers took their own lives as a result of that crisis. Drivers were left with $550,000 in average debt. The same lenders that we had kicked out of the housing market, the city welcomed them into the taxi medallion market. And so when I ran for assembly in 2020, I sent a mailer to my constituents saying, one of the promises I make is to cancel excessive medallion debt, to stand up for these drivers. And in that first year, that's exactly what I did. I started by questioning then Mayor Bill de Blasio about his insufficient plan for debt relief. I went on to work with the union, the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, which organizes thousands of working class taxi drivers. We did 45 days, consecutive protests and press conferences, rallies. I then escalated and organized 5 other elected officials to engage in an act of civil disobedience outside of City Hall. And then finally, I went on a 15-day hunger strike alongside these very taxi drivers. And I did all of this while ensuring that while I was building on the outside, I had built a relationship with Senator Chuck Schumer on the inside, who was fighting for the same aims of debt relief. And on November 3rd of 2021, after 15 days of not eating a single thing, we won $450 million in debt relief. Wow. So I tell you this, it is easy in Albany to measure experience through the language of those chambers. Experience that can only be boiled down to bills passed or positions held within that same chamber. But experience to working class New Yorkers is also, did you or did you not deliver for them? Whether you did that in or outside of the office, whether you did it at City Hall or in Albany, that's what my experience is. And if you want the experience of a former governor who cut Medicaid, who stole hundreds of millions of dollars from the MTA, who cut $1 billion in tax breaks for Elon Musk, who said he was fighting for working people while giving his rich donors tax breaks, if you want a so-called leader who is funded by the same people who put Donald Trump in the White House, then that experience you'll only find with Andrew Cuomo. But if you want experience in fighting for the very people he left behind, then that's what I offer on June 24th.
All right, go on. We're in Harlem, Uptown. Bronx is down the block. All right?
Let's go.
I was talking to some friends of mine, and I asked them, who is your city councilman? Who's your assembly person? When did you last vote in the local election? There was no answer to any of those questions. And I didn't ask those questions to expose them. I really wanted to see what were the barriers to them engaging in local politics. And in unison, they all pretty much said, yo, I was trying to get home safely, trying to make sure I got food. Like, I didn't have enough time to really worry about who's sitting in that seat. You know, like, I'm not engaged in politics at all because I don't see it in my face and I got other things to worry about. So my question to you is, what do you say to people who are struggling with what do you say to people who are Harlem and Uptown people who are struggling to be interested in politics? And how will you engage people of Uptown to really be more involved and to understand exactly how important this mayor election is?
I think the first thing is to listen and not to lecture. There are a lot of New Yorkers who have been let down by politicians, the city level, the state level, the national level. And too often the instinct as a politician is to hector someone into taking action, as opposed to understanding why they haven't. Because there is a rational reason for so many in choosing to disengage with a system that has not given them much recognition at all. And when you start at that place, you can actually ask those same people, what is it that would bring you back into this? And I asked these very questions after New York State had the biggest swing to Donald Trump of any state in the country, 11.5 points. And that swing happened far from the caricature of Trump voters. It happened in places like Fordham Road in the Bronx or Hillside Avenue in Queens. And I went out there and I asked those New Yorkers, who did you vote for and why? And I heard from many of them, I didn't vote, I voted for Trump. I said, why? They said, because I remember having more money in my pocket 4 years ago. I remember being able to afford my rent, my Con Ed, my groceries. And while I can't afford any of this, my federal government can afford multiple wars at the same time. And here is this candidate talking to me in a language of change and affordability and ending these forever wars. And as insincere and ridiculous and horrific as we know Donald Trump to be, that's what I was told. And I asked those same New Yorkers the question that I would ask your friends, which is, what would it take to bring you back? And those New Yorkers told me a relentless focus on an economic agenda. And I said, what would you say to a candidate who wants to freeze the rent for more than 2 million New Yorkers? What would you say to a candidate who wants to make the slowest buses in America fast and free? What would you say to a candidate who sees $25,000 as the annual cost of childcare, more money than it costs to send your kid to CUNY, and says, we're going to meet that with universal childcare at no cost? What would you say? And these same people who had just voted for Donald Trump told me I would vote for that candidate, and I introduced myself.
Thank you. Urgent.
All right, we're gonna hear from one of our pre-selected questions.
Yeah, we asked some people to submit questions in advance, so we're going to ask some of those questions here. And this is kind of the flip side of the coin of the question that Imani just asked. This was submitted in advance. The person who submitted says, my mom has lived in New York since she moved here at 9 years old. She's voted in every local and national election since becoming a citizen. She has no social media presence. In fact, the trends and antics that excite younger voters would likely turn her off. But she's the one everyone on the block turns to for voting advice. She texts her entire contact list to make sure people have rides to the polls. And someone to go with. As an educator and community member for over 40 years, she's been the quiet backbone of the neighborhood. What does your outreach look like for older New Yorkers in communities like this? People who would directly benefit from your policies, but still don't know who you are.
We have to meet this woman. She sounds incredible. And I say that this is the story I've heard so many times. These are the New Yorkers who are the messengers in their own communities. And it's easy to speak about our campaign, and many in the media do, solely through the lens of social media. I would be concerned if that was the way our campaign was exclusively connecting with New Yorkers. But like what you were saying earlier of your friend who's canvassed 3 times, we built a team of 25,000 volunteers, the likes of which the city has never seen, that has now knocked more than 600,000 doors across the 5 boroughs. And my mother is one of those volunteers. She has her weekly Sunday shift. She's paired up with a 25-year-old canvasser that she complains walks too fast. And she goes up those 5 floors of a 6th floor walk-up after 10 consecutive not-homes, still motivated for that next door knock. And if somebody tells her that they're going to vote for us, she says, that's my son. But if they say they're going to do their research, she doesn't tell them. But I say this to say that the reason that we are now within 8 points of Andrew Cuomo is because New Yorkers have taken this message of affordability and they have become the messengers. They have knocked on the doors of their neighbors. They have told the people in their lives that this is a campaign that is actually going to deliver the city that we deserve. And thanks to the support of many in this room, we can couple that social media, that field, that phone banking with an $8 million budget. Because thanks to the people in this room, we raised that maximum amount of money we can spend in a primary. We did it from 20,000 people at an average donation of around $80, and we did it faster than any campaign in New York City history. And I was sitting with an elected official in our city, and they told me, I woke up this morning, I was just trying to watch the news, and I saw your ad for Tox. Can you just leave me alone? And that's because of all of you. Because of all of you, we can ensure that we are going to speak to New Yorkers when they open their phone, when they open their door, when they open their mailbox, when they turn on their TV, or also when they're just walking through their life. Because that's how we win this race. We meet New Yorkers wherever they are. We don't just wait for them to come to us. Because too often politics has lost that sense of humility, that actually we are offering something to New Yorkers, but it is our responsibility to speak to them, not wait for them.
So, I open up to that. Zohran, ever since you touched the mic today, You've been spitting facts. I'm gonna let you know that. Facts. And everything you have said today resonates with me. Truly, you inspire me. But I got some facts for you. All right? So, NYCLU recently released a report on the NYPD's stop and frisk task force. Listen to this. They pulled numbers from the NYPD's annual reports. According to that report, there were 25,386 stops of New Yorkers by the NYPD. 14,662 of those stops, or 60%, were conducted on black people. 7,662 of those stops, or 31%, were conducted on Latin community members. That's a grand total of 91% of NYPD stops being of black and brown people. So my question to you is, how will you address the issues of over-policing, racial profiling, and police misconduct in communities of color, like Harlem? And what will real accountability look like under your administration?
It's a great question. And I want you to just walk with me a little in this answer.
I'm with you. Let's go.
Now, it's easy for us to caricature Eric Adams today. It's easy to think that this is who he was always. But in 2021, when he was running for mayor, he told New Yorkers that they need not choose between safety and justice. Those are his words. Those are the words that a majority of New Yorkers who voted in that election, that's what they were voting for. There was a message also within those words of reform. And it has been lost in the way in which Mayor Adams has been unable to deliver the former and uninterested in delivering the latter. And I say this to say that too often when you talk about justice, you are told that that is a concern of a select few. And it is one that is distinctly progressive in its appeal, when in fact it is a concern of many New Yorkers, the very ones who delivered the current mayor that we have.
That's right.
And so when you talk about it again 4 years later, you can still build that same constituency, that same coalition. And ultimately, it's a recognition of the fact that we need to deliver public safety, and we need to ask ourselves, is everything that is being done actually in service of that? Because there is so much that we are doing today that has no relationship to public safety. There is no relationship to public safety when Eric Adams sends the NYPD onto a college campus to abuse students exercising their First Amendment. There is no relationship to public safety when that decision leads to an officer discharging their weapon and hospitalizing multiple students. There is no relationship to public safety when we ask New Yorkers to be proud of their civil rights, and then we have a unit within the NYPD called the Strategic Response Group that has been found to abuse those very rights on an annual basis.
Jump out, boys.
And that's why I have made the commitment to disband the Strategic Response Group. And ultimately, these are commitments that always work backwards from the outcome of public safety. Because if that is the outcome you want, then there are so many more policies to pursue. And I'll just say one last point on this. You know, so often when we talk about public safety, we're also having a conversation around mental health. The single largest mental health facility in New York City is Rikers Island. 40% of incarcerated New Yorkers on Rikers have serious mental illness. And we know that Rikers is a political stain, it's a moral stain, it is also a fiscal stain on this city. It costs our city $550,000 to incarcerate a New Yorker on Rikers for 1 year. Now, if we were actually interested in mental health services, we would look at the model that already exists in New York City, a model called clubhouses. There's one example called Fountain House. There are 16 of them in New York City. They decrease hospitalization rates for New Yorkers with serious mental illness by more than 45%. They increase employment rates by more than 50%. And this peer-led rehabilitative program costs $4,000 a year. That is 2 days on Rikers Island. So at the core of our proposal to tell police to focus on serious crimes and to hire mental health professionals to do the work of mental health professionals is to create the Department of Community Safety that will tackle mental health, homelessness, gun violence, hate crimes, and victim services in an evidence-proven way that has already been shown to be successful elsewhere in the country and right here in New York City.
So I am the child of immigrants. So is Conrad.
Where from?
Kenya, neighboring Uganda. Yes. Our countries are neighbors to each other. And as a matter of fact, Conrad has an aunt who is stuck in Kenya, who's visiting from Jamaica, who cannot come back to the U.S. because of Trump's policies. So my question to you is, what do you say to the millions of immigrants in Harlem and Uptown community that are afraid of Trump's immigration policies?
I tell them that I understand, because I'm an immigrant as well. I got my citizenship just 7 years ago. And earlier this year, just a few months ago, if even, my father went for his citizenship interview at Federal Plaza, downtown. And I hugged him goodbye that morning as he went into the USCIS building, next to an entrance that says for ICE. And I didn't know if he was coming out of that building later that day. I didn't know if he would be detained, because we've seen what this administration is doing. And I sat in that cafe across the street for hours, waiting and waiting. And finally he emerged. And I had my father back. And yet I know that is not a feeling that every New Yorker gets to have. It's not a feeling that Dylan, a high school student here in New York City who was just detained by ICE, it's not a feeling that his family will have. It's not a feeling that Mahmoud Khalil's wife will have as he languishes in a detention facility in Louisiana. It's not a feeling that so many New Yorkers will have, because in the face of a federal administration that wants to create the single largest deportation force in American history, all we have is a mayor who wants to collaborate with them to keep himself out of jail. And we have a former governor who is unwilling to stand up to that same administration because he's funded by the same people that gave us that administration. And I'm proud I'll be the first immigrant mayor of this city in generations, but more important than what I'll be is what I'll do. I'm going to stand up for our sanctuary city policies. I am going to recognize the fact that they used to be defended by Democrats and Republicans alike for decades until we got Eric Adams.
Wow.
That they have statistically proven to have made our city safer. And I will ensure 100% compliance with those laws so that every family knows when they send their child to school that that school will not allow an ICE agent inside unless they can provide a judicial warrant signed by a judge, which they rarely ever have. And I will also start to provide legal representation for New Yorkers in detainee proceedings. Because we know that when a New Yorker has legal representation, their chances of being reunited with their family are 11-fold higher. And so we are going to start to do everything in our power to reunite those very families and to ensure that this is a city that doesn't just celebrate immigrants in our symbolism, in our Statue of Liberty, but also in the substance of our policies, of our budget, and in the leadership we are sorely missing right now from the mayor's office.
Yes, thank you for that. And you kind of already answered the next question, because I was going to bring up Mahmoud Khalil. And I was going to bring up the rights of students to protest on campus. And I hear you when you say that you're going to have schools check ICE at the gate, so to speak, so that ICE is not coming in wantonly and snatching students from campus. Can you tell me what other policies do you have in mind to protect the rights of students to protest at campuses?
No, I think it's important for a mayor to concern themselves with the city of New York. And what I mean by that is we have had a mayor who's wanted to instead insert himself into the issues of college campuses. We are talking about violations of colleges' rules of conduct, not violations of the criminal code of New York City. We have far more important things to be doing than siding with administrations of different colleges because students want to occupy a building. The very act that they celebrate now, decades later, when it pertains to the Vietnam War. So what we need to do is ensure that we lead this city with humanity, And I say that because my politics comes from a consistency, a belief that freedom and justice, liberation and safety, these are things that every person and every people deserve. And we deserve to have a mayor who is focused on what is happening in our city, on making it more affordable, but who leads with that same sense of consistency, who affords humanity to all those they represent, as opposed to what we have right now in the picking and choosing of when to deign a New Yorker worthy of those things.
Yes, and just a quick follow-up to that. More of a challenge than a question. I don't think there are any other candidates in the race right now that have promised to go see Mahmoud Khalil. Is that something that you think you'd be willing to do or able to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Now, I have had the privilege of being in communication with his team in asking how we can best help and support the urgent necessity of reuniting a New Yorker with his family. And I say New Yorker because there are so many of these modifiers that are used in the coverage of so many of our neighbors, whether they are undocumented or they're Palestinian, whatever it may be. At the core of this is that these are our people. These are New Yorkers. They deserve not only the recognition from their leadership, not only the respect, but also the protection. And it's time that we finally start to afford that to every New Yorker.
All right, so I got one more for you, and then we'll see if we have time for one or two questions from the audience that were pre-submitted. All right, so again, all my questions are Uptown related.
Go for it.
All right, I've been living in Harlem or Uptown for about 8 years now, between the Bronx and Harlem. In just my 8 years of being here, the changes to Harlem have been crazy. Like Sephora's and on 125th is kind of crazy. High-rises, Trader Joe's on 125th is kind of crazy. We used to live together actually on 125th in Madison, and the way it looks then and how it looks now is kind of crazy. So my question to you is that Harlem and many uptown communities are rapidly experiencing gentrification right now. And what is your plan to keep long-term residents of these communities here? And how do you keep Uptown affordable for working class people?
It's a great question. You know, I was sitting with a reverend the other day, and he was telling me the history of the different hearts of Black New York City over time. And how Harlem was not the first place, but how one of his worries was, will there be another Harlem? Will there be another place to go? Because he looked out upon his congregation and he told me he had lost so many of his parishioners to North Carolina, to South Carolina. People going back to the South so many decades later because of how expensive this city had become. And one thing that he underlined to me is that they did not want to leave. They did not want to leave the community they had built, the relationships that they had, but they felt they had no choice but to leave. And it goes back to that desire to ensure that this city does not become a museum, that Harlem does not become a museum to Black excellence, but a living testament to it. And the way that we do that, you know, oftentimes politicians, in speaking about displacement, will seek to blame it on individuals as opposed to institutions, as opposed to the policies that allow for this kind of displacement. And there are two key things I want to flag. The first is we have to ensure that we keep New Yorkers in their homes. So if you are the close to 2.5 million New Yorkers who live in rent-stabilized housing, we're freezing your rent so you can afford it next year, you can afford it the year after that. If you are one of the other 50% of tenants who live in market-rate housing, we're going to build 200,000 new, permanently affordable rent-stabilized homes built for the New York family that is making $70,000 for a family of four, the median household income of this city. So you can actually afford to find a place. And I know there are many New Yorkers also who maybe they can afford where they live, but they're being pushed out by a landlord who's refusing to make the repairs at the place where they live. And that's why we have said we're going to crack down on bad landlords. We are going to actually have a 311 system that works. We are going to have one that believes in a city where you can track your food delivery on an app that you can also find out when your investigator from 311 will be coming to your apartment. It shouldn't be revolutionary, but it is. And we're going to say that if a landlord continues to violate the housing code of this city, racks up millions of dollars of fines, year after year, we are going to take that building back from that landlord. We're going to put it back into the stewardship of the community. And the last thing I'll say, the affordability crisis isn't just one that affects tenants, it also affects homeowners. Before I was an assembly member, I was a foreclosure prevention housing counselor. I worked in Queens with low to moderate income homeowners in Jackson Heights and Richmond Hill. And I saw firsthand just how inequitable this property tax system was. I saw firsthand that Eric Adams had raised the water bill to the highest it's been in 13 years. And when I was an assembly member and I entered into negotiations with Con Edison, I saw firsthand Eric Adams siding with Con Edison to support a $65 a month increase across gas and electric. So that's why we have put out a homeowner policy platform as well, just a few days ago, to show how we will stand up for the third of New Yorkers who do own their own homes. And we'll stand up also especially for black New Yorkers who have faced a crisis of deed theft across our city. And we are going to create an Office of Deed Theft Prevention that finally provides those very New Yorkers with the assistance they need to ensure that they have wills that are written in advance and that they actually have access to investigators and assistance to fight back against these horrific attempts to steal their homes from them.
Thank you. All right, we're winding down the night right now, but we do have a question from the audience from my good friend Pat Lockman. So I'll hand the mic to Pat.
One of the issues that concerns me is the plight of our seniors, our elders, most of whom are on fixed incomes. And unaffordable rents is probably one issue, but the other is the inability to access health care because they either don't have health care or they are underinsured. And so I would like to get a sense of your health policy as it relates to seniors over 65.
It's a great question because this is one of the driving costs for so many seniors across our city. And the city, despite what it may say, has a number of tools. One of which is within its own control to ensure that we continue to provide those health benefits for retirees as well. And we do so with a recognition that we need less profit seeking in our healthcare, not more. And what has been so frustrating for me as a supporter of universal healthcare in Albany, the New York Health Act, is to see the ways in which we tell ourselves that this is normal. That spending this much money on healthcare for this little in return is normal, when we know it is actually not. It is unique amongst industrialized nations across the world. And I think that the city has an immense amount of leverage, considering the number of New Yorkers that it has insured, to start to secure far better benefits than it has, and start to drive down many of the costs that we see. And the last thing I'll say here is health and hospitals within our city's government should be a shining jewel of what we can do. But it has been underfunded at almost every turn by this administration. And we need to start ensuring that the doctors who do the work of taking care of the most working class of New Yorkers are ones who can afford to keep working that job, are ones who can actually be paid something closer to their worth to this city. And I am excited to be the mayor of this city because ultimately the buck will stop with me and I will be able to settle contracts that do much more to recognize the value of that work.
Yeah. All right, so the final question. Now, Zohran, this may be the most important question you've been asked.
I lose the
Let me down.
I'm telling you, this will make or break your campaign.
Okay.
All right, and may I remind you from Queens?
Yes, sir.
All right. Word around the street is you're a hip hop fan.
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna give you an option to answer one of two questions.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Option one is who is the GOAT? Or option two is who is your top three?
Let me down.
Why did it feel like the second option was going to be so much easier than the first one? Okay, I'm going to tell you my journey, and then I'm going to tell you the answer I should say, and the answer I will say.
Okay.
So I moved to New York City in 1999. We used to have Tower Records by Lincoln Square. I used to love going to Tower Records and just pouring through all the CDs. And then I would come outside and there would be the guys selling the bootleg copies of everything. And so the first album that I ever got was the clean version of The Blueprint. That was the clean version where I quickly realized that it was the clean version. I had no idea. But then growing up in this city, you know, now I grew up in Morningside Heights, now I represent Astoria and Long Island City. And I also represent Queensbridge houses. And so if you represent Queensbridge, you have to honor Queensbridge, which also means Nas, right? Also means Mobb Deep, especially when we know Shook Ones was written about Andrew Cuomo now that he saw this poll. But ultimately, the rapper that really captured my imagination when I was growing up in this city at that time, for me, was Lupe Fiasco. Lupe Fiasco, as a young man in this city, I remember when Kick Push came out, you know, The Cool, I mean, these were songs and albums that taught me how to see the world.
Right.
And one of the most beautiful things to grow up in this city is that you could go to these concerts.
Right.
You could go and see your favorite artists. And those are some of my favorite experiences, whether it was seeing Lupe in New York City, whether it was when I went to college in Bowdoin, I got to see J. Cole for $10.
Wow.
Or even when Common came here and performed. I mean, these are some of the performances that gave me a sense of what it meant to be a New Yorker. And I know those may not be the correct answers, but that's my path.
Great answer.
Can we all give Zohran a round of applause? Zohran, no time is short. We want to take some closing remarks.
Yeah, you know, I just want to say, if we can have a round of applause once again. For the incredible duo up here, for Eli here, for Harlem Nights. You know, this campaign is a love letter to this city. This is a city that has given me so much. And we are running to give back to this very city. And one of my favorite experiences about running for mayor is the opportunity to meet so many New Yorkers and to speak about the vision for this city, but also to listen to the issues of this city. And I just want to say thank you to so many of you, because I remember sitting in a coffee shop in Astoria in the fall of last year, and I was sitting next to someone very involved in politics, and they showed me a poll that they had just seen. And they said, "Look down the bar graph. There you are." And I was at 1%. And today, to be here with you, just 8 points away from beating Andrew Cuomo. It is a journey that has only been possible because all of you have seen yourselves in this campaign and have actually been this campaign. It's you who has knocked the doors, who has made the phone calls, who has donated. It's you who has told your friends about this campaign. And I just say that to remember, it is so easy in politics and in the coverage of politics to think that it is a politician who wins a race. But actually, it is the movement behind that person. And it is an honor to be one small part of that movement with each and every one of you. And it's an honor to build it even more over these next 20 or so days and to win this race on June 24th.
All right. Before we wrap up, we literally have like a minute or two remaining. We have just a few announcements and thank yous, and we'll be out of here. The first, I'm going to say real quick, we know there were many dying, burning questions. We're very sorry, but time is limited. Also, we know many people may have wanted to chat with Zohran after, take a photo, but again, time is limited, so we won't get to it either. So very sorry for that, but thanks again for really being here.
Yeah, so if you want to get involved with this campaign, you heard from the man. If you believe in what he's about, and if you believe that there is a different future for Uptown, for this city, if we're not resigned to going back in time to somebody we already know was a failure, you can go to zohranfornyc.com/5, then things. There's 5 things that you can do to help out this campaign: checking your voter registration, pledging to rank him #1, signing up to canvass, like many of our friends have done already. You will gain something from knocking these doors. I did a lot of it. I'm telling you, it might seem intimidating, but you will not regret going out and knocking doors. You'll get to know your city better. You don't know what's inside of all these buildings, even if you lived in a neighborhood for a long time. So I really urge you to do it. If you can't canvass, you can join a phone bank, another way to reach New Yorkers, and ask people that you know. Tell 3 friends, leave from here. If you believe in Zohran, then tell 3 friends to rank him #1 on your ballot. All right?